It's time now for Facts Are Facts, and we are about to get a little bit morbid because whether you want to be buried or cremated when you die, neither actually are great options for the planet when you're long gone.
Yeah, but maybe it's a good time to talk about this, right? No time's a good time, but now that we're bringing it up, the U.S. uses 4.3 million gallons of embalming fluid every year, and a huge amount of that is formaldehyde, methanol, and benzene. Not the type of stuff you want to be seeping into the ground.
No, and then there's the casket that accounts for 20 million feet of wood, some of which is sourced from rainforests, and we've talked on the show before about how much concrete contributes to the greenhouse gases.
Yep.
We use more than 1.5 million tons of concrete annually for burial vaults.
Right. So with all that in mind, maybe you'd consider going green for your burial. It's a growing industry, actually. Edward Bixby is the president of the Green Burial Council, joining us now. Edward, thank you so much. Such an interesting topic. We really got a conversation going before the show about this, but let's just kind of break down the traditional burial. You think, I'm going to be cremated, I'm going to do something good for the planet, but the reality is it's not good for the planet.
That's right, Stephanie and Jordan. Thanks for having me. Here at the Green Burial Council, what we do is educate people to the merits, not only of the environmental benefits, but the spiritual benefits of what we do, meaning that going back to nature as we've come most certainly makes the most sense. Things like cremation, add to the greenhouse gases and carbon footprint. And as you had mentioned, concrete production and the depleting of the rainforest doesn't help. So essentially, just to go back to the earth, makes the most sense and economically and spiritually and environmentally.
Okay, so what are some Green Burial Council approved methods? Can you literally just dig a hole and bury someone?
Yeah, so believe it or not, you can. There is no laws within the 50 states of the United States that prohibit natural burial. Embalming and concrete vaults and things like that, they're not a law, that they're not necessary. You don't have to use those. Believe it or not, a lot of it comes down to the cemetery itself and what they allow. And many cemeteries, they require things like vaults and stuff, but quite honestly, no one is making them do that. They can change their own rules and regulations. So yes, you can actually just dig a hole in a cemetery, a legal cemetery, and lay your loved one to rest.
Can we go back, historically speaking, that's what we used to do. Dig a hole and put a body in it. Where did we go to adding all these chemicals and why?
That's a very good question. So you're absolutely right. Since the dawn of time, we've practiced natural burial and we've handled our loved ones' bodies doing so. But during the Civil Wars, when this came into practice, the embalming practice itself, people wanted to get their loved ones back from the battlefield. They didn't want to have them buried far away. And they had introduced embalming. And after they realized they were able to do that to preserve the body, that's kind of how it came to be. And then, of course, over decades and generations, we've kind of lost touch with caring for our loved ones in death. So it's become a normal practice here in the United States.
Jeez. I love the ocean. I think a lot of people are with me on that. You feel at peace there, you calm the whole thing. Can you just throw someone overboard as a burial, or is there something you have to do in particular if you want to be buried at sea?
Believe it or not, you can actually do that, and again, along any of our coastlines, but the requirements are that the individual has to be placed in water at a depth greater than 600 feet, and there is that the body is weighted down with stones. That way it cannot, come back up. But yes, absolutely, it can happen. And in certain states like California, where you have very deep water, that can happen within sight of land. But of course, in a state like, let's say, for instance, New Jersey, where I'm at now, you have to go a great distance, about 80 miles offshore to get to a water depth of that.
So to me, it kind of sounds like a no-brainer. We should be getting away from the chemicals. I don't know why we're still doing that. But when you're having these conversations with loved ones who are trying to move on and figure out where to put their own loved one, what is the response you're getting when you inform them about the green process versus the other process?
Well, what's kind of ironic is that because people don't realize they can have this, they act very surprised. And they say, I only chose the cremation option because I didn't think I could have something very simple like this.
Right.
So they're actually that they're very happy that they can have it. It changes their minds about what they want for themselves. And to be honest with you, the environmental benefits are absolutely wonderful, but the emotional benefits of caring for your loved one in this type of setting where you're able to lower them, to backfill that grave. It's a cathartic experience that changes not only their perspective on death, but on their perspective on life itself.
But what if someone wants to do the traditional route? What if they have customs that they need to abide by? Are there ways to do it greener?
Sure, absolutely. You know, ironically, the majority of the customs that exist, believe it or not, are already green by default. Like, for instance, Muslim and Jewish burial practices, and most burial practices around the world are green. In the United States, this is kind of something that we kind of do, but you can observe any kind of religious, celebrations in a green ceremony. It doesn't change anything at all.
Is there any conversation about, this is a weird question, but like animals digging up or, causing problems to the burial site after it's done?
That's an interesting conversation or question to have. I get that a lot, but believe it or not, that doesn't happen at all. And I'll tell you why. At the depths that we bury, 3 feet or greater, things like odor and things like that, that's really not a problem. But what I tell people is that the types of animals they're worried about, let's say, for instance, coyotes or things like that, they eat living things. They don't eat things that are expired. So that's not desirable to them. So we have never, in my 15 years of operating natural burial grounds, ever had an animal disturb a gravesite. And the only time an animal ever even entered a gravesite was when a fox created a fox den in the earth of a burial mound, and it had no interference with the burial at all. So things like buzzards and things that are eating expired things, are interested, but certainly not animals that don't eat expired animals.
Okay. And I'm assuming you don't have to worry about smell either because they're deep enough into the ground. No, not an issue with that. That's good. I did want to ask you, though, about the cost of this, because I just went through the process with my family, with a family member that, we were getting a plot for. It's really expensive. Are greener options typically cheaper?
Absolutely. They tend to be cheaper because you don't have services like vaults and traditional caskets and the embalming service itself. But, when it comes to a burial plot, yes, I see it as cheaper, but everything is relative. It depends on the location. It's kind of like real estate. Unfortunately, you have to say that, but it's true. But I would say on average, a natural burial is about half of what a traditional burial is. And right now, a traditional burial in the United States is about $12,000. So you would expect to pay a funeral home and a cemetery probably somewhere between $4,500 and maybe $6,000 for a natural burial. Certainly, you might find it cheaper in other locations, but that's probably about right.
This is such a fascinating topic. Edward Bixby, thank you so much, President of the Green Burial Council. We really appreciate your time and the awareness.
Very well.